She's the Chief People Officer at the Granite Group, located just 20 minutes north of me in Concord, New Hampshire. Tracie is responsible for leading all people functions throughout the company, with 53 locations and growing, and over 700 team members throughout 6 states. Describing herself as a business leader specializing in people, she is an advocate of embracing the importance of learning about the business technology, the critical nature of relationships, the importance of a growth mindset, speaking up, and learning to always put people before profits. Let's bring her on. Tracie is a global speaker, founding member of numerous organizations, a special guest on many podcasts, and her expertise has been featured on the BBC, NPR, ABC, USA Today, U.S. News and World Report, Wall Street Journal, and many more. Tracie, I am very excited to hear you speak about the topic that I wrestle with regularly, which is burnout. What does it look like, feel like, and more importantly, how not to just survive, but to thrive? Let's welcome Tracie on.
Hey, thank you, Kibar. Can you hear me? Give me a
We got you.
thumbs
Come
up.
on
All
over.
right, great. Thank you so much. We could have done this in person.
I
Didn't
know.
realize that you were like 20
Just
minutes away.
just south in Hooksett. Yep, absolutely.
Pretty awesome. I'm there quite a bit. I live and work in Concord. So I'm
Love it.
really excited to talk to you today. As Kibar mentioned, I'm a chief people officer. So my full-time job is working with our people and helping to create an incredible individual people experience. And I'll talk a little bit about the Granite Group because I think that really informs my talk. There's no slides. I'm not scripted. It's just going to be, you'll hear me say a lot. It's just going to be a chat. If there's a couple minutes at the end, I'll take a little bit of Q&A, but I want to talk a little bit about my experience because I've gone through burnout. And I think, when I was putting together a talk, I really could have talked on anything. And a lot of the speaking I do is to HR audience, the HR audience. And I think this is very relevant, but I wanted to go a little bit broader. And I also feel like sharing some of my experiences, if they could help one person, two people, great, right? So that's why I decided to talk on this topic here. So let me tell you a little bit more about my company. So the Granite Group is a wholesaler of plumbing, heating, cooling, water, and propane supplies. And we're in over 50 locations all across New England. And that becomes important because we are an essential business. So at the very beginning of the pandemic, we never stopped working. So we have people all over New England who in March of 2020 were scared to death that they were going to die at any second. So we on our small people team were kind of holding those hearts in our hands and guiding people through that while still trying to figure out all of these laws and policies and how do we keep people safe. And I had somebody on my team running and buying Clorox wipes at every grocery store and sending them to our team and sending out toilet paper and doing all of these incredible things that we look back now and go, wow, that was a long time ago. And I talk about that because I don't blame burnout on my company. And I'll get to that later because I think a lot of companies are responsible for burnout. Fortunately, not mine. And I'll get to that a bit later. But that was the start of me going, okay, I'm digging in. I am going to sacrifice my own mental health for the well-being of our people in our company, and I can figure this out. I learned I'm really good in a crisis, so I'm unfortunately one of the people you want to go to if something's really, really wrong. I can figure it out and I can guide the company through. When we started doing that, it was like, what, 3 weeks? So we're like, okay, everybody's going to do what they need to do for like 3 weeks, and then we're out of this, and here we go. Well, that 3 weeks came and went, and it was pretty clear that, there's that joke going around that avoid them like the plague, that people actually didn't do that anymore. So we just kept going and going. And then 6 months into the pandemic, my mother passed away, and I just was, responding to COVID response. Over a year into the pandemic, I got to get a little bit of time away in a safe, socially distanced place, and was still all day long responding to things. So it went on and on and on and on. And I didn't really think about it too much. I tried to do some exercise. I actually did really well through the first year, and then it kept going. And what I realized about a year ago, actually, was I was really tired all the time. I just, hopefully I can swear, I just did not give a shit about anything. About work, about home. I did my job, but I've always been a high performer, and I wasn't. I was doing what I needed to do. I was letting connections go by. I was having a lot of sleep problems. I started eating lots and lots of chocolates and lots of unhealthy food, which was delicious, but really not my thing. And I was self-isolating myself, not only from my people at work, but my family too. And um I was angry all the time. I just figured, okay, well, my mother had died a year before, it makes sense, and I'm angry. And I remember just being around that time, just angry all the time. And I think it actually goes back a lot further. And I mention all of those things because those are all signs of burnout. They can be signs of other things like depression, but depression is a diagnosable mental health issue where burnout isn't. It's attributable to generally specific factors. In my case, it was, how I was approaching work and how I was approaching my life. So, all of those things weren't normal for me. I didn't really recognize it. And I just kept going. And I went through the winter thinking, well, I hate winter anyway. This is just terrible. We went away for a long time, actually, to Florida in the winter, trying to get away from it. And, it just continued. And then I read an article in this spring. It was based on research done by WorkVivo, and it was an article by Jack Kelly in Forbes that talked about, the headline was, and if you're in HR, you probably remember this, but the headline was 98% of HR professionals are burned out. And I went, wow. So I am certainly one of them, if that's the case. And I started thinking about my friends, many of whom left maybe not only their jobs as HR leaders, but their companies, or just left the workforce altogether. People that I know from LinkedIn, people that I know from Twitter. I was talking to my CEO about this the other day. Almost everyone I know changed jobs, it feels like, during the last couple of years. And in some cases, really valid. Toxic workplaces, overload, really valid. That wasn't the right move for me. I actually thought it was for a while, but it really wasn't the right move for me. So I really did a lot of thought after I read that and started doing a little bit of research. I kind of reconciled with it like I usually reconcile with things, and I wrote about it. And when I wrote about it, I started to hear lots and lots and lots of stories. And I started to hear lots and lots of people go, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me. And I went, you know what? N- Not only do I have to figure this out for myself, but I'm going to kind of share what I learned along the way. So I've been doing that, and that's part of this. Now, I don't give advice. I talk a lot. I'm grateful to be able to share what I've learned over the years. You can take with this what you will. I am not an expert. I'll tell you about an expert in a minute. But this is just my own experience. So, what worked for me may not work for you if you're struggling with this, but I'll tell you how I got through this. So that was sort of that trigger. That article was actually sort of that trigger. There's more research from Gallup that shows two-thirds of American workers are burned out. So this is a national, international, a global problem. This is not just limited to the world of HR. But again, we've had to hold the hearts of our people in our hands for so long. It's been so tough. So what changed for me? Couple of things. So I had a conversation, or rather, my boss had a conversation with me this spring, and I'm pretty sure it was probably one of the most difficult things he's had to do. And he just basically said, you're not engaged. What's going on? You're not visiting the locations like you like to. You've missed a bunch of meetings. It sounds like maybe it was harsh. It was all true. And it was exactly what I needed. When I first talked to him, I kind of listened and nodded, and then went away angry because I was angry a lot. Um, and then I kind of stepped back and I thought about it. And because this is around the same time as I read the article, and I went, I've got to talk to him. I got to tell him what I've been struggling with. I've got to be really vulnerable with him and share that with him. And also around that time, I had planned, and I had planned this for years. I planned a day of pure joy just for me. So this is really silly, but this was one of the big things that helped. I um, planned a concert trip. I planned a concert trip to see Aha, which was my favorite band when I was growing up, and they played at Radio City Music Hall. So my husband and I bought tickets forever ago. I kind of waited and got what turned out to be second row seats, and we were so excited. And we went. We stayed down in New York City for the night and got there, and we were kind of way off to the side, still great seats. And then somebody happened to come over who had friends in the first row. And they said, "Hey, do you mind switching seats with us? They're first row center." And I was like, "Sure." And I look back at that now. Obviously, we had the best seats in the place. I was right up front. I had literally, I think, the best night of my life, purely for me, pure joy. And I look back in that and think, like, that was the time when I went, I'm going to be okay. And there were lots of other things that happened, but I had not experienced pure joy in probably 2 years, maybe a little bit less than that. So that was kind of the trigger for me. And then I went back and had a conversation with my boss and told him about that and told him what I was struggling with and told him how I had trouble getting out of bed, that I didn't like to talk to anyone, that I didn't want to see anyone, that my job as a chief people officer I was able to do, but I was doing it administratively largely, which isn't the way I like to do it. So his response was, "How can I help?" Which is exactly the response that I would have wanted to have. And we talked a lot about it, and I didn't really know. And I think he felt sort of bad that maybe he didn't say anything earlier. But knowing that I had his support, knowing that he felt that the company was better with me being engaged, and better with me getting help that I needed, and better with me finding my way back to health. And that meant a lot to me. And that really cemented my time here. Like, because what I'm so fortunate to have that. What more could I want in a CEO? So it's been many months now, and I am not just surviving, I'm thriving. And that's not on my own. And again, here's what worked for me. This may or may not work for you. So having those open conversations, really, really, really important. I not only talked to my boss, I talked to friends, I talked to my HR community, I talked with my team, I talked with my leadership team, I talked with my executive team, I talked with my family. And I think that's really important to acknowledge that. And again, I told you I write about things. So I wrote, and that helped me sort of process that. I've always been pretty good about exercise, but I took the lazy way out for me over the past year or so. And I told you about the eating, so I gained some weight. So I started like exercising hard and challenging myself and just cleaning up. I still eat chocolate, but cleaning up how I ate. Those things helped. Hobbies. I hadn't cooked since I think before the pandemic, and I love to cook on the weekends. I like to make a big meal or bake, and I started doing that again. I started asking for help and support, and I started setting boundaries for myself and for my team, and figuring out my non-negotiables. So my non-negotiables, I tried to have those through the pandemic. It was hard. Are dinner with my family and time to exercise. So when I started like taking calls when I was on my Peloton, or when I started stepping away from dinner, I knew that I was kind of breaking that up. But putting those in place, putting those hard boundaries in place, it's hard, but it was really necessary for me. So, and it wasn't like, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and you'll be fine. It was, try this, that didn't work, 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 this worked, and this works too. And maybe if I figure this out, that's going to work too. Travel was really instrumental for me too, because that's something that I enjoy. And once we could, that helped a lot. And I have a friend, this is the expert that I mentioned. Her name is Melissa Doman, and she wrote a book that it's called Yes, You Can Talk About Mental Health at Work. I talked with her. She and I have spoken together. I reread the book. I really kind of listened to her, watched her, read what she wrote, and kind of gave myself permission to go, you know what? It's okay not to be okay. And we hear that a lot, but it's okay not to be okay. And I had that kind of pressure on myself. I've got to be strong for everybody else. I can't, let anybody know I'm having a terrible day, I'm having a terrible week, a month, a terrible year. So I let go of that. So, and one of the things that Melissa talks about a lot that I think is important and we don't always talk about is personal accountability. You heard me say I don't blame my employer. Some of my friends do. Some of my friends have reason to. I do not work for a toxic employer. I work for a great employer. I did not raise my hand and ask for help. Um, I didn't know how. I didn't know what was going on. So as I think about next year, and as I think about my team, and as I think about our company and how we're going to help our people, and not just because of my experience. My experience is not unique. I know we have people in our company who are going through this. I know we've had people in our team that are going through this. As much as I tried to protect people, I couldn't always do that. That doesn't always work. But what we can do as people, as leaders, as just general human beings, as HR professionals, as people in the workforce, we can listen. We can listen to people. We can talk to people. We can look for signs if there's a behavior change, if somebody's angry when they aren't usually angry, if all of those things that I talked about, patterns are changing. We can create, and we heard our speaker before talk about psychological safety. We can create those psychologically safe places. And that can be done whether you're in the office, whether you're virtual, whether you're distributed like us, we're all over New England. That can be done. You can listen and then you can respond. And the last thing I want to say is you can talk to others within your community, and you should, and you can listen and learn. One of my favorite sources of information, it's specific to HR, but it's called the AIHR. I'm gonna, I use this a lot, so I'm gonna mess up the acronym, so I'll just leave it as AIHR. But they just published 2023's focus areas for HR. Number one was total wellness and focusing heavy on burnout. So if we're not, as leaders, as humans, as companies, creating these spaces to talking with our people, finding out what they need, getting involved in their lives in ways that we hadn't before, we're going to need to start, because health is connected to mental health, physical health is connected to overall well-being. Overall well-being is connected to employee satisfaction, and employee satisfaction is connected to performance of the company. And it's just the right thing to do. It's just the right thing to do. So I'm happy to connect with any of you on LinkedIn. You can find more of my stories there. I'm happy to talk with any of you who are going through this or have gone through, but you can find me. I'm the only Tracie Sponenberg, as far as I know, on LinkedIn. You can find me pretty easily there. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with all of you today.
Thank you so much, Tracie. That was terrific. Thank you for sharing your experience about burnout and everything. I especially enjoyed your conversation with your boss and feeling psychologically safe to go up to them and have that conversation, which is terrific.